Okay, now coral is really important because it's an animal and it helps create these environments that will create different types of islands that we find predominantly in the Pacific. And as coral grows, it can create islands, and as it breaks down, it will add material that can be used to form the beaches. It's again, it's a really small marine animal. It's what we call a polyp, and it secretes carbon calcinate or calcium carbonate, and that forms these hard skeletons, and that's what it looks like. And they produce these very large structures that we know as reefs. And there's different stages, fringing, barrier reefs, and then when they break down, we get atolls. So originally, it'll be a volcanic island. Then the fringing reef starts to grow. As the island starts to erode, because you're in the Pacific, often near the equator, so there's lots of rain and it's volcanic in nature, so it erodes very easily, carrying the sediment down, which creates these shallow lagoons, and the fringing reefs start to form these barriers. Eventually, the island will disappear, and leaving this ring of reefs that enclose the lagoon, and that's called the atoll. Again, very, very, very part in the Pacific. You see these, many of the Pacific islands are what we call, the high islands, the newer ones, and then the atolls that were formed by these coral reefs. Okay, so it's very, very temperature specific, and that's what happens if it gets too hot, as what's happening with global climate change. If it gets too warm, it kills the coral and it bleaches out and dies. This has been a big problem. All this in where the red is where we have coral environments, and they're all being affected by the warming of the ocean water. Another one is another environment in the coast is coastal wetlands, of which we have plenty here in Southern California. They're saturated with water that it supports plant growth in water or wet soil, and these are salt marshes and mangrove swamps. And mangroves are usually in the tropics because they can't survive freezing temperatures, but salt marshes generally north of the 30th parallel, so north of the tropics, and we see them all over the East Coast, but we have them here in Southern California as well. And you get this environment where it's this kind of mixture of salt water and fresh water, but it will support its own environment. And they're quite beautiful and have their own ecosystems, of course. There's your mangroves, seeing pictures of these, see them in Florida all over the place. But they're great because they hold sand in place, so they're very good for stopping beach erosion. And with the sea level rise, this is all here in the United States, it's already impacting here on the Gulf Coast, especially around New Orleans, and also down here in southern Florida. And if it continues to rise, as most people does, it's going to dramatically affect, people all over the world. They'll have to move elsewhere. Okay, so let's go on. So coastal hazards, human impacts, storm surges, and erosion. When you get a storm tide, it's higher than the normal high tide, and people build homes often, near to the surf zone where the waves break. But if we get a storm tide, it breaks higher and can impact their structures, or can start to erode away the beach, as you can see here. Okay, and then we'll get into how you protect that in the next part.